Hello, this is Marta Klepka. I'm head of growth in 10Clouds. Welcome to the next episode of 10Clouds Voices interviews when we talk with tech experts and industry specialists. Together in the podcast studio are with me Wiosna, Michał, and Steven. Steven is actually broadcasting live from the US. Guys, it's great to have you here. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Welcome,
Thank you.
everyone.
Hello. Would you be able to tell a few words about yourself, introduce yourself, and tell our audience why you are in the position to give them some hits and tips and tricks on the subject that we are talking today?
Yeah, of course. So, hi, I'm Michał Kujszo. I'm head of delivery and co-founder at 10Clouds. So, and 10Clouds, as some of you may know, is a software agency. We have around 200 people, developers, designers, testers, and various other support and engineering team members. So, like, we are very conscious of everything that's happening on the market, because like new products, there's more products when there's more business, when there's good times, a bit less leads, when there's less times, bad times. So it's very connected and visible in our work all the time.
Great. Wiosna, what about you? You're an agile lead in 10Clouds, right?
Yeah, I'm senior agile coach and product delivery manager at 10Clouds with the company for almost 4 years. Before that, I was also involved in consulting industry. So I think that the growth subject as such is very important and very close to me, because when I do projects or when I advise companies on any transformations, I can spot some patterns, like what works for growth, what doesn't, what are the, let's say, growth inhibitors and growth like supporters, let's say.
Okay. And our third guest today, Steven. Steven, will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Stephen Lois, I run the Enterprise Sales Institute out of Michigan. We focus primarily on revenue operation. So how do you decrease your customer acquisition cost? What kind of systems do you need for scalable yet optimized growth? That's where we come in. So happy to be a part of the conversation. I'm the least technical in this call, but thrilled to be a part of it.
Come on, you forgot I represent the marketing team, so not the least technical.
Marketing these days is very technical.
That's true. That's true. We are looking a lot at the data those days. So actually, to our audience, maybe a bit of a context. So when we were discussing what we could talk about in the next 10Clouds episode, there is a one subject that is on the lips of everybody, right? So this is it's called different names. It's crisis, economic slowdown, bear market in crypto world, but everybody feels that, whether you're a smaller company or a bigger one. We usually work with scale-ups from the US, but like also those tech giants are influenced by that. So we were actually looking at this subject, and we talked about the fact that the history shows that even during such severe economic downturn, there is always a small number of companies that are thriving, that are even able to become unicorns. And the $1 million question, which we would like to answer today a bit, at least to give some hints, is how to become one of those 5-10% of the companies that can actually use this slowdown to their goodness. So going to the growth offensive as opposed to just taking an economic stride. So before we start, maybe still the discussion, let me just tell to the audience that we are going live on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And if you have any questions to us, just ask them on the comments, and we will be gathering them and we will answer them in the end. So we will try to wrap up in around 30 up to 45 minutes and then have enough time to all the questions. So I hope there will be a lot of them. Great. So the first subject, actually, when we are discussing about this, is how to manage the business in those hard times. And like I see that even when we talk to our clients, majority of them are actually like cutting down the costs. They're rather taking the step back. And when we talk about business management, there are probably some hints that can be used by them that we actually even apply in our companies. So maybe let's start from that. So Michał, I would like to start from you as a co-founder and as a business owner. What would you advise to our audience in that matter?
Yeah, I think cutting cost is sort of an easy way out, but like when revenue, if revenue is dropping and there's no visible, like less leads visible, like this is the responsible thing to do. And I think that to do it, like you first really need to understand where can you afford to cut costs, like which functions of a company like are not crucial or not part of your like core strategy. So like for me, like it's very important that like during downturn everyone really understands what are the strategic priorities, what's the company's strategy, so that you can like really focus on those areas, and then you can identify areas that are not contributing so much to them, and then you can figure out whether you can decrease costs or like take out some overhead there. So like and I can imagine that like things, any kind of experiments, things that are not validated, things that weren't working are like might be the first step to actually move away from. But then like you shouldn't move away from things that are working. If you have like a marketing channel that's working well, like you need to double down on it. Like you need to like focus on it and make it even more efficient. If you have like some strategies around within your delivery team that are working very good for hiring team members, you need to double down on it. But perhaps don't experiment too much with things that aren't working so well, that are new things that you don't know whether they will work out, because that can be just wasteful.
Mm-hmm. So as we call it, milk that cow, right? That's what we usually say.
And really remember about the focus. Like that, it's very easy to defocus and then look for new things, but it's not. I don't think it's the way to do during a downturn.
Mm-hmm. And we see that a lot of our clients and like on the market already last year during COVID, a lot of companies again looked at becoming more agile and lean. So like Wiosna, from your standpoint in terms of business management and that way towards becoming more agile, what would you advise here?
I think like the main point is to not think about agility in terms of some frameworks, but about agility in terms of being able to make decisions quickly. And to do that, you need to actually have first what Michał was just talking about. So this focus and understanding what you're good at, what your vision is, what your strategy is. And then make your company more agile. Try to decentralize the decision making. Make the decisions on those levels that are closest to the actual operations, that are closest to your customers, that are closest to your business partners, because then you are able to take those decisions much more quickly. That's one thing. And the other is that they're probably much more attuned to what is happening on the market. So this is obviously dependent a lot on the trust that you as a manager are able to give to the employees of your company. So you need to foster the trust. They need to feel that it's okay, that they can contribute, and they need to understand this vision and this strategy, to understand what are like the options, that the frames where they can use those decisions to contribute to the company.
And that was actually surprising for me when I joined 10Clouds, that we have this don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. And I think this is a great example. Stephen, would you like to add something on that from your perspective?
I think the biggest thing for me is in a good economy, when money is flowing, it's really easy to invest in sexy technology, something that sounds great, AI, blockchain, etc. And there's always a time and a place to develop what sounds good to you. But I think too many companies put too much of their investments into brand new R&D based on what their roadmap is, as opposed to what data says from customer engagement. What's the activation point for the product that you're building? When do people actually adopt it? And I think, if you look at companies that have grown in a recession, look at, first of all, 10Clouds. My understanding is, Mihao, you and Mache built 10Clouds in 08 and 09. You look at Airbnb.
Yeah, that's exactly the time. It was like funny because like we were for a very long time we were under impression that we are all the time operating under recession, but this is like for the first couple of years it was situation normal for us basically.
So then also look though at Airbnb, I think WhatsApp, Instagram, Slack, interestingly enough, all of these companies were really, really good at dialing in on what the customer wanted. They could dramatically expand and make a bunch of cool, sexy tech. Look at Slack. It was a very basic chat platform up until maybe the last 2-3 years where they've added in automations and whatnot. They focused on what the customer wanted, not just what sounded really good to them. And that obviously served them right. I think that's one of the biggest downfalls of tech companies these days.
Sure. And even if we like take all those things you're guys discussing, right, if we getting more agile, more decentralized in terms of making quick decisions, like fostering the leadership and all those things which we discussed, there's always the other side of the coin. So there are, of course, our people, our tech talent, and we all know that it is really hard to recruit. And as Stephen actually recently, you also mentioned that we should first focus on conversions, then scalability. So for me, it is the first to focus on retaining the talent which you have, which actually we know that getting a new person on board is much more expensive. Again, it's like getting a new client. It's always easier to get to keep the satisfied one. The same with tech talent. So I think it would be great also if we can touch a bit about like retention and recruitment of a tech talent and the scarcity of it nowadays, and how hard it is to acquire actually the developers, good designers, and probably also like good salespeople. Like this is something that you probably Stephen know the most. So Michał, how do you retain the most valuable employees in like delivery? Because you're also like in 10Clouds like head of the delivery. So actually majority of the delivery team, developers and designers are under your supervision.
Yeah, this is like an challenging problem because like on one hand, like during recession we have there's less business, less interest, less investment money, and so then less product development. But then on the other hand, the tech market in terms of like employment market, like very slow down, but it's still hot. If like people, if for good engineers, there are always opportunities like to go to there's always some opportunity, even though we are in a slowdown. So then it's harder to retain those people, and then it's like even more important. So like what we are like focusing on, and I think that what's working, what has the best chance of working, is to really make sure that like people first feel safe, so that they know that the company is doing well, feel that they feel comfortable. They are during recession or events like war in Ukraine at the beginning of the year, that like we are really very honest with communication, and very transparent of how those events affect our company, so that so that people are not stressed more than they can handle that. And then on the other hand, like, so that's one aspect, this kind of safety, and the other one is like really meaningful work content and meaningful projects, meaningful engagement, so that people really want to work with us and stay with us. And if you have two of those things, like you're in a pretty good position, because of course, like you need to be, especially with tech talent, you need to be, you have to be at a proper baseline in terms of salaries, but that's obvious. But if you have those two things, like safety, good culture, and meaningful work, like you're in a pretty good position to start. And that's what we are really focusing a lot right now to provide that, and I think it has a very good chance of working.
Mm-hmm. Steven, would you like to add something again? Because I know that sales, in terms of like sales teams, it is also a challenge to retain them nowadays, right? We can see that also in our case.
Yeah, so it's interesting. My background originally started in talent acquisition over a decade ago, and one of the things that I learned is you can take even a very what could be looked at as a menial job or rudimentary job, as long as the person understands why they're doing what they're doing, they're going to be more engaged. Take a look at like an SDR, BDR type role. No one wants to do it anymore, right? Who wants to pick up the phone, make calls and get rejected day in and day out? And a lot of them go by scripts and so forth. So it's hard to find purpose in that. Yet I can spin that and help somebody understand that, look, they're the lifeblood of a company, because without them, there is no company. They have no leads, no opportunities, no pipeline, etc. They are one of the most important positions in the entire business. And while that might sound a bit dramatic, that's the level of intensity that you need to come with when you're trying to sell somebody on a job, sell somebody day in and day out on staying engaged. And I think that's one of the things that people miss. They sell somebody on a job and then they expect them to do their job and that's it. And while that's great and practical in theory, it's just not practical in real life. Every single day you have to sell your team. And especially when there's a talent shortage, not just in development, but absolutely in sales. It's brutal trying to find anybody right now. Everyone's hopping over to, companies that are willing to pay 10, 20K more, at a time, and then they end up job hopping. You have to sell your team day in and day out on why you're doing what you're doing. If not, you're going to lose them. I don't care how much you pay them. Somebody can pay more.
Yeah, so we are getting back to this kind of communication and context that like, it's crucial. Like if you don't have it, like in this environment, you will not be retaining your team. Like it's gonna erode.
And the point that you raised, Marta, like we need to have this team that understands, and we need to have it and not change it. Like the churn and is like a real risk. Like it really inhibits the growth if you need to invest all the time again and again in onboarding new people and recruiting and onboarding. It just wastes the time and effort and money basically of the company.
And like before we go to the recruitment part, there was one subject when we were preparing that was like of an interest to me, and I think this could be actually something that can be interesting for our listeners as well. About like, of course, we have lots of benefits nowadays, but one of the something that people are looking for, besides the ones you Michał mentioned, is also like this flexible work environment, and it really means something different to everybody, and like we see so many different ways to approach it by the companies. Some are forcing people to come back to the offices, and I know there was a lot said about it and this hybrid work and stuff like that, but I think it is still an interesting subject, like how to use this possibility to actually reach the employees from all over the world to the good of the company. So how to balance this remote work versus working in the office. Like what could be an approach that could help accelerate the companies nowadays?
I really believe that on this level of like remote work versus office, like it's really depends a lot on the role, on the like type of work a specific team or team member are doing. So like for tech teams, like this is a really very like convincing setup and a very efficient setup, because like most of the work you can do remotely without a big efficiency loss. And what we're doing is like what we are doing. Nearly all of our teams are distributed and like working from home, and like we are trying and to get the teams on site, like during workshops, during planning, when do we want to do this, to get them some more context, and because this is very efficient, like and I think that this is a very nice balance, especially for tech teams that have this kind of capability to work like that. And I think that tech companies that don't allow this kind of distributed work from home setup, like they're going to be having problems and challenges with retaining and hiring, because like right now it's clear that it's the new norm. and quite necessary. But like I think that it really depends on a specific like role, and because and I can imagine that in some roles like for example sales and marketing, like there's a bigger, I think that there's a bigger benefit of having those teams on site so that they can brainstorm more often, so that they can listen in to the call. So there's this dynamic that's more difficult to like replace than with tech teams.
Or even for the company management to be able to meet right on site, whether it's in the office or like regularly somewhere on like workation or any other opportunity, right? To brainstorm. All right. Yeah.
I think that I'm going to go back to what Michał said. It definitely depends on the position and so forth. So for example, if it's a very quantitative role and you can assess, yes, the job's done or no, it's not very easily, great. It's very easy to make that person remote, right? Think about an account executive closing deals. Are they hitting their revenue? Perfect. Did the developer finish what they were building? Yes. Great. But when you look at, think about like a demand gen job, right? SDR, BDR. I'll go back to that for a second. It's such a qualitative role. You can look at activity, but you don't know what's going on in conversations. You don't know if they're actually learning objection handling. You don't know how they're handling these calls and emotional selling, et cetera. And that makes it a lot more difficult. So while I'm not one that's anti remote work by any means, I would suggest that for roles that are heavily qualitative, a hybrid model is the best approach. Keep them engaged, give them some liberty, give them some freedom, but you still have to make sure that everyone is improving on a daily basis. And if you can't quantify that, you got to be in touch with them on a daily basis.
Sure, that's a very good point. And if we're talking about like quantification, I just read some results that actually a year ago, when there was a survey done in the US on the market. It's a qualitative sample of tech employees. That 70% of them, over 70%, declared that they will change their work last year, within a year. So here we are, a year after. And this great resignation is actually it is visible like all over the place. It's visible in Europe, in our region here in the US, and as you mentioned, Michał, like it's at this point after COVID, it's really hard to compete often in terms only of salary, because like we are competing globally with also big tech giants. So how to win, how to accelerate in terms of really well done recruitment if we only, let's say, regardless the rates, what else we can offer to those tech talents to attract them?
Yeah, like the salary ranges, like you need to be, it's baseline. Yeah, so you need to like offer the at least what your competition is offering, or otherwise like you won't be able to recruit fast enough, if at all. The things that really can distinguish companies right now is like their employee value proposition, is like their culture, is their way of working. So those things, and like the companies that can really show that can really be authentic about it, they are doing better job at recruiting. So like we, for us, like besides having the right salary ranges, like we really focus a lot on the company culture, and like we measure it periodically every quarter. We use ENPS scoring to do that with a very detailed like set of questions, so that we know in which areas are we doing good, in which areas are we doing bad, and that also helps us like to know where to put emphasis when we do recruitment, when we make our content, and when we talk about why it's worth working with us. So like, and then and we get this very clear signals that people working with us really value the connection, the relationship, like the team members, their team leads. So then it's that we know what are our strong points, and then we can leverage that in getting new talent.
So I think very often today we actually came to the conclusion that we have to measure well, right? Monitor, track, and like really look at the impact of what we are doing. And we are discussing here, obviously, one of those most difficult to acquire talents, so like developers, designers. But that's not it, right? So Stephen, during our discussion, you also said that Actually, I think you even quoted some research from the States that also sales team are one of the hardest right now to recruit, right?
I think the top 4, interestingly enough, is a mix of developers, salespeople, nurses, and truck drivers. Now, obviously, this isn't a conversation for nurses and truck drivers, but those 4 areas have some of the largest talent shortages ever right now. Obviously, everything's tech and people can't keep up with development, but sales just isn't a desirable position to so many anymore because of what it's turned into. It's order taking, reading scripts, processes, etc. We've gotten away from what selling really was, which in large part is a conversation for a different day. But yeah, sales is absolutely a massive talent shortage, especially when you have Microsoft, Citrix, all the big tech companies throwing large salaries at even menial sales reps every single day. Of course, there's going to be a shortage.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we want the sales guys, if they doing their job, to be well remunerated, right? When we were like laughing that this is like a doctor example. I don't want my doctor to be, poor, because that's not gonna work. Okay, so like we covered the main 2 subjects. We were discussing about business management in the time of recession. We're talking about talent shortages. We covered a bit of a sales and marketing, like how to accelerate in that matter. We will come back to this, but I think right now we actually got to the point of this core offering. So whether you're a product or service company, we are discussing how to deal with that in economic slowdown. And again, what we are facing working with clients is that a lot of them think that right now cutting the budget in terms of product development, this is a way to go. Maybe we'll just wait, we'll see what others do. From your approach, Vyosna, is that like how do you actually usually recommend to work to the clients?
So like this approach is risky, I would personally say. So we have a pretty volatile, dynamic world, and the markets usually, like there are many industries that are stagnant. So if you're not changing, if you're not building up, then it means that your competition and your clients as well may just run away from you. Like the world will move while you stay where you are. So
don't tell me, I'm a marketer, I know that. I have to learn every day.
Yeah, exactly. So and that's the point. Like you need to and again we go back to the focus. So you need to understand what you're good at, and like double down on that. And then, okay, if you have limited budget, which is probably understandable, or you don't want to like make huge investments or huge commitments, that's also fine. You can work with small increments. The main thing is to try and understand, okay, why do people want my product? Why do they want my service? What's the value that I deliver? Revisit that, make sure that you really keep understanding that, that you have this knowledge, and then you can tweak, you can see what works in your product. For example, maybe you can cut off part of the features that aren't used if you want to save some money.
I would add to this that especially like in this changing world, like there's definitely like risks, but then there's opportunities, like
For sure.
like with when we were going into COVID, like areas like remote calling, so it just exploded. So like there were products that just you had to they just had to innovate to just get into those new opportunities, like with e-learning, like with basically everything going into remote mode. So we can see with Zoom, with Microsoft Teams, great that they use those opportunities really enormously. Exactly. So you need to be really aware of how the market is changing, and then if you shouldn't sleep that change through.
Yeah. So that's why we call this continuous discovery. So you need to, like, regardless of whether you are in the middle of introducing your product to the market, or you have introduced it already and have a customer base, you need to still really discover and talk to your users and understand, and also as Michał is correctly pointing out, understand the opportunities. So you can't just sit down and say, okay, here's my roadmap, I came up with that 6 months ago, it still looks nice. yeah,
just
it may
throw it
look
away,
nice.
right?
Maybe not throw it away, but just
Mhm.
validate it. Keep validating that.
Mhm.
See where the new risks are, where the new opportunities lie. Like, I don't know, metaverse, for example, or well, maybe not this year, maybe not the best example, but NFTs. At some point, who knows? It might actually be an opportunity for you.
Mhm. Stephen, did you have to throw away your roadmap for your business development this year?
Didn't have to throw it away, but I did have to adjust it. And so I'll back up for a second. I think one of the things that a lot of companies do is they look at what their competitors are doing. They look at that as the industry standard, and then they have to do exactly what their competitors are doing, plus one. So let me build out the same features my competitors have, and then add one, and then they're going to do the same thing and add one, right? And that's how we get slow innovation, but innovation nonetheless. The approach that I took, and what I encourage a lot of my customers to, is take a look at the competition and do the exact opposite of what they're doing. So while all my competition is focused on, let's do lead gen, and let's do a bunch of consulting and strategy to help companies out, my approach was, no, I'm going to dive into the weeds and become the top expert in revenue operations and Salesforce and processes, et cetera. And nobody else is doing that. But you can apply the same thing to technology. Don't just build the same thing everybody else is. Look at, for example, the CRM market. It's all the same garbage done over and over and over, and everyone trying to just match the same features that Pipedrive, HubSpot, and Salesforce have. If you do the opposite, you're going to meet the needs of a different segment looking for the same solutions, or they're in the same market, right? Just stop using the competition as a benchmark for what to do. Look at it as a benchmark for what not to do. Stick out like a sore thumb.
That's true. As we were discussing, actually, yeah, that, for example, if you are reading through the bunch of emails and there is the one that is like really, I don't know, is it funny, or is it just like very well personalized, but it stands out that this is something that is actually able to attract your attention, and this is the sales rep that is able to actually sell to you, right? Okay. But like we're discussing still that even though you have to disrupt and like don't mimic the competition, but how do you monitor the competition still? Like, how do you do this, let's say, also in a cost effective way, maybe? Because of course it's easy to like run a big survey, and but this is not something that we are doing usually in the recession, because all the R&D budgets are cut right now. Yeah. So maybe Wiosna, can you tell a bit about that?
Well, there are options. Like, there are some solutions platforms that kind of automate your competition analysis for you. So obviously, not as such a deep dive as you would do with such a big survey as you mentioned, but you don't necessarily need to do it every couple of months, right? So you need to understand what you want to learn from your competition, and to do that, like, again, going back to what is my core offering, why is it valuable, and then just check, okay, what is the competition doing in this area, how are they communicating, and then you probably don't need to invest that much time or that much money into some solutions that could support you in that. So yeah, you can also very quickly just turn to your user groups, your customers, your business partners, and talk with them. It can be like an hour of talking with a focus group, maybe.
But I think that you basically need to be like on the lookout. So like be open to have those discussions, like talk with your customers about like what was better, what's different in an offering from a competition. Like why did you choose you? Because very often when they open up, and then like what I see personally is like that, especially in our market. So with software agencies, with consulting companies, like there is some community of people that are exchanging ideas, and it's good to be a part of that community and like just listen and talk and share your knowledge and expertise, and then you get back much more as well. So that you shouldn't forget about it. You should really be vigilant and think about and resonate with an information that's coming towards you.
And we still have events. This is something that fortunately came back after a long break, so we can always talk to each other there, right? So I think we are using this opportunity a lot, actually. We have a question from Katarzyna on LinkedIn, and I think I will ask it right now because it's related to product. So, do you think product-driven growth is a viable option in this market?
Mm, do you mean like this market, the current market situation?
Yes, the current market situation. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like you just need to find this niche or opportunity, just like what Michał was saying. Those examples like Zoom, whose market share like skyrocketed, even though everybody was already very afraid of the recession that was coming. Like, everything was in lockdown. Nobody knew what was happening. There was a lot of uncertainty, but still everybody had to use Zoom, and their business expanded. So product-driven growth is absolutely an option.
Yeah, I think that there's new challenges happening, like and then you need to adjust your product or figure out a niche that that will grow during a downturn, because there's some industries that are slowing down and then there are new being created or growing faster. So it's just a matter of finding the opportunity, and it's within the blockchain community, there's the saying that when there's a bear market, it's the best time to actually build, and that's the time when you're going to be really focused on your customers, on the product, and don't get distracted by the hum of investment money coming in, or like good times, I would say.
Yeah, there's nothing else to
So
do then.
I'll be
Steven?
the contrarian here.
too.
Product-led growth to me works if you have a consumer or very small business focus, and it's a low barrier to entry. So think like a Slack or a Zoom, right? The problem is you have companies building really cool platforms, really comprehensive platforms, and then they believe, when I build it, people will come. It's the field of dreams mentality. And that just doesn't work. It works for a very, very small segment of people that have freemium and low barrier to entry models. And people aren't putting enough stock into both sales and marketing. Take a look at Zoom and Slack. Why did they do so well? Is it their product? Yeah, sure. But their marketing is also kick ass. Their marketing is focused on emotional buy-in, connect with people instantly, save time, etc. It's not just about the product. And if you have a higher ticket offering, whether it's a service or a ERP, CRM, I'm kind of making it up here. You have to be able to sell. You have to be able to dive into your customers' pain points, and just saying, here's our product, it should sell itself. It just doesn't work. That's not real. It's people that want to build technology without having to learn how to sell. And look, without technology, I have nothing to sell. So they're equally important, but I think we have two sides fighting to put the other one down. You have to sell, you have to market, or there is no product you're never going to get the product to market.
Sure. We agree to disagree probably on that, but or maybe there is something in common.
I think it's a balance. I think that this kind of aspect of enterprise sales is a very good one, because very often it's difficult to get to get to new customers, to get into new enterprises. But if you have a product that can be easily installed or used by the team organically, then you have a much better chance of okay, there's some team is using it, and then you can expand within the company, because and they become your advocates. But then of course you cannot do it without a sales force. You need to have a team that will push that ahead. So it's in this case it's like a balance. You need to have both product and a team that will then push if it's gaining traction and interest,
and the ability to create those needs as well, right? Because some of them are also some of them are appearing now, but also still sometimes if you really believe in your product, and if you help to create this need to your customers, then you can be also successful with very strong messaging, very disruptive one. For example, we have another question from Marcin on LinkedIn. And I think I will also ask it right now, because it's about your examples. Wiosna, you were talking about tools to track your competition. Can you give some examples here?
Not off the top of my head, sorry.
Okay, so Marcin, we will be coming back to you after that. We can still do this in the direct message, so you can get those insights afterwards. We will share our know-how with you after the recording. Okay, so I think we discussed again the three main topics, and last but not least, I know, Stephen, that you believed, you told me that it's better to become the one-stop shop than one product wonder. And here again, still we are talking about while increase earnings when others lose. So I, for example, feel the contrary, that now it is not the time, and a majority of the companies that are selling services or products actually do not deliver. My experience from as a marketeer, if I try to use those all-in-one solutions, usually they really, like, after a while, like 3 months test, we end up in using 3 different solutions that are actually doing the job. So it's better, even if they are sometimes not integrated, sometimes siloed. So like what is the solution here? Like what is this one product wonder about?
So first of all, it's a balance.
Mhm.
Go on Product Hunt for 2 minutes, and you'll see a lot of one product wonders, random little plugins, random little widgets that have very few applications, and they're trying to build a business and do product-led growth based on that, and it's never going to work. However, conversely, I'll give you the example. I personally don't like HubSpot, Fresh, or Zoho because they are trying to be one-stop shops to the point where I think their technology is very diluted and frankly dumbed down. So I'm all for using industry-leading tools. That being said, I think there's a difference between being a one-stop shop for everything under the sun, like a HubSpot, Zoho, or Fresh, and I don't know. I'm picking on those 3. I'm sure that there's many others, but you can
Salesforce.
Oh, I like Salesforce though.
It's actually a very interesting example because Salesforce has incredible extension capabilities, and this is like in the current world when you can connect everything with everything, it's very important and very helpful.
It's a dream come true, but it's a nightmare for marketeers, though.
It's a controversial topic. Like people love it and people hate it.
Salesforce can be your worst friend or best friend based on how it's set up. But take Salesforce, for example. Everything that they do is, complementary, to say the least. And then they integrate with every other platform under the sun. So you have horizontal growth. Then they start to add additional products more for vertical growth. So it's a slow build out, but the more complementary products and services you have, the better off you're going to do. The easiest customer to sell is the customer you already have. My entire life right now is focused on how do I help customers decrease their customer acquisition costs, because then you have just infinite growth potential sitting right in front of you. Well, if my customer acquisition cost decreases because I sell them on 3 products or services instead of 1, fantastic. Now my business is more scalable. It is a fine line. There is a balance that needs to be taken into account, but a one product wonder just is not going to last forever.
Sure. And if we're talking about actually CAC, so like customer acquisition costs, those are actually growing right now. Yeah. So like to accelerate what I observe is basically a lot of media cost is increasing. The customers, like the decision-making process is a bit slower. So are there ways to actually optimize your customer acquisition costs right now and to keep them stable, Stephen?
So I think a couple of things. One, I'll go back to something that you alluded to earlier, which is I'm all for optimizing the sales cycle before you focus on scalability, especially when money isn't flowing the same way that it was 6 or 12 months ago, where you could just go get funding, invest in a bunch of sales reps, fire the crappy ones, and keep iterating upon that. You have to actually be able to sell. You have to actually be able to market. You need to have your conversions in place and be able to know what your CAC even is before an investor is going to take you seriously in any way, shape, or form these days. So that's number one. Number two, you can reduce CAC by really focusing on how can I provide this person the best customer experience or best sales experience possible. We're so focused on systematic growth that we end up treating our prospects like crap. Let me put you through a qualification call, then a discovery call, then like 14 needs analysis calls, and come back to you with a proposal that's 82 pages long. I'm being dramatic, but not as dramatic as a lot of people would think.
Or sending the person from one sales representative to the other. This is something that is my nightmare.
It's like, but at one hand, you try to like optimize efficiency. So when you get people that are specialized in this, but then like, there's this kind of handover cost. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. This is, those are real problems and challenges.
It's also actually looking at the right metrics. So I don't know how many sales organizations actually know what their CAC is. They look at revenue, they look at leads generated, but that's not the same thing as knowing what quality leads were generated, how many of those turn into opportunities, why, what are the demographics behind that, and how many touch points do you need? And then you need to merge sales and marketing together. So you may know exactly how many sales touch points you have, but are you also retargeting? Are you engaging them via marketing as well? Are you combining all those costs into a comprehensive CAC measurement? Most can't say that, which is why then they're hesitant to invest in growth, and they'll keep investing in what they do best, which is build technology.
Okay, would you like to guys still add something? Because like we are slowly going to the end of our meeting today. Anything to wrap up on that?
I think like I get a bit inspired by Stephen talking about metrics, because this is actually very important also for the product. So like you have a ton of options to measure your product. Some are related more to growth, some are related more to engagement. But the sensible thing to do is to really have maybe something like a North Star metric. So, like Spotify, it's the time spent listening. And it's like this one metric that obviously like translates to a lot of different things when you try to, when you decompose it. But then you have the pretty clear understanding business-wise, value-wise, what you want to achieve. And like what gets measured, it gets managed, right? So you need to know that.
Yeah, but then there's a tendency to have a lot of vanity metrics, and in the end,
Exactly.
we should look at the revenue, right?
I think that like in that, because like everyone, technical people like and managers love the metrics. Yeah. So then you but like I think it's okay for you to be observe a lot of metrics, but then there's a difference between a metric and a key result, or like a KPI. Like those are not the same things. So yeah, one you try to optimize, the second one you just like look at, so that it gives you insight. So it's good to have this, and like very often like organizations have this kind of bias that everything that's being measured needs to be in a spreadsheet and like optimized. But that shouldn't be the case. Like you should really focus on a couple of those metrics that are your key results or KPIs. And like I think that to what Stephen was saying about like this kind of understanding your CAC, like I think that it gets back to this kind of focus. You need to really know what should be your focus, which areas like in your process you need to focus on, so that to be able to optimize them. So like this kind of understanding of your business, of your strategy is just crucial.
Last thing I'll add
Sure.
to that. Take a SaaS company just as an example. Most would look at sales as, okay, we got somebody on a platform through a free trial or whatever. Now it's up to product to retain them, and churn is solely dependent on the product, and that's not true. So if I'm going to look at customer acquisition cost and lifetime value, I want that to ultimately come back to sales. Did they bring in the right lead? Did they nurture them to the point of activation? For example, is the activation point that somebody needs to log into the SaaS application 4 times and then they forever stick? Is it that they need to take certain actions within the app or web app, whatever the case is? If they're not doing those things, you have to ask yourself, just as importantly as the question as, did we build the right features, right product, right experience? You have to ask, is our sales and marketing team actually bringing in the right leads at the right time for the right reason, with the right intent, with the right sales pitch, right communication, and nurture them through that cycle? And I don't think many people are doing that. We're so focused on scalability that we forget about the why behind a lot of these KPIs. And scalability is key, don't get me wrong, but when costs are rising, you have to focus on cost reduction through customer acquisition cost reduction by asking a lot better questions.
Yeah, it's kind of like, in the lean product lifecycle, you need to validate first before you grow. Like there's a logic to that. So like Steven's saying, be careful before you try scaling. But I think, like Steven, what you're saying is kind of very related to what I'm always thinking, like from the product perspective, from the value perspective. Like when you understand your customers and what value your products or services are bringing, then you need to make sure that you have a coherent message, and also that the marketing and salespeople understand this offering and this value and are able to get those right leads and communicate it throughout those early stages of customer lifecycle, so that you avoid situations where the client is then unhappy.
Or we are selling what we don't have.
Oh,
Even
yeah.
worse. It happens. But I think I really liked also in our discussion that when we're talking about looking at CAC, and like a lot of companies don't look at that. And like, for example, in our case, looking at this cost of acquisition per channels was very liberating. Also, we understood like there are some channels which were like, we kind of thought that they are working, but we never really looked at that so in depth. And this was like really, we knew that we, like in that case, in that situation, we should really double down the investment there. So that was like really money, that this is the money well spent. All right, guys, so that's fantastic. We need to wrap up. So from I have some notes here after this meeting. Focus your organization on what works. A lot of focus, a lot of identification of the strategy. Make sure you're looking at the right numbers. Here we were talking about right numbers in terms of talent, in terms of product development, in terms of sales. Measure a lot, but focus on a few KPIs, the North Star. Retain the talent by identifying key employees, letting them make decision. Remember that how was it? Now I forgot. Say it's better to like in 10 Clouds, it's better to say sorry than just make your own decisions. Let them make their own decisions. Foster good leadership culture within the company. And I think a lot of what we discussed is also ended up to look at the impact on what you're doing, instead of just communicating what you actually do. And I think that Stephen, a few times actually mentioned that be bold in terms of disrupting the market. This is really the moment where it's better to stand out than just miming the competition. Anything else, guys? Would you like to add to this wrap up? Any final thoughts? One. If you are to say one thing, you would advise to our audience at the very end as a wrap up.
Well, remember, Marta, when we were speaking as like preparation, we talked about this VUCA, so this VUCA or whatever: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and this is like the characteristics of the times that we live in. And when you're a manager, like, you can also turn it around. So it's V for vision, U for understanding, like what you're good at, for example, clarity, also of communication, what you just said, and then agility, but again, not as oh, I have Scrum framework in my development. That's not agility. Agility is about being open to experimenting, being open to making decisions quickly, being open to trusting people to make those decisions.
I would add that basically, when there's always, after recession, there's always better times.
There's
so
hope.
Like you just need to like go through this, and when it's there's gonna be growth again, and new opportunities. So it's important to remember that we are living in there's cycles, and those cycles it's part of a game, I would say.
And as we discussed, just use it for your own goodness, right? Like,
yeah, you need to just ride out the storm. Yeah, so I think it's when there are challenges, you can always try to turn them into some opportunities. So you have to think about it like that, so that you have the right attitude to it.
You can benefit if you wait for a while and you actually look around and you let's say reorganize. This is also a good moment for that, right? Stephen, anything else to wrap up?
No, not to sound like a broken record, but I think the biggest thing is people need to ask better questions about why they're seeing the metrics that they are, not just, to try to look at vanity metrics. To me, even revenue can be a vanity metric. What was the cost of that revenue? What is your revenue per employee? I think that's a good gold, North Star type of metric. I think people need to dive into the why a lot more than just, okay, let's throw more fuel on the fire. Let's continue to scale. Well, if you're scaling a non-profitable or very little profitable business, what the hell's the point?
Great. Thanks a lot. I don't see any more questions from the audience. We almost spent an hour. Guys, you are watching us. If you have any other questions after the show, please, you can see all our profiles on LinkedIn or on Twitter. You can address us via direct messages, so feel free to do that. And let's meet on the next episode of 10 Clouds Voices. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dean.